Okay, so we've all heard that phrase, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Newton's third law.
Yeah, exactly. But what if I told you this basic principle of physics could be a key to understanding something much bigger,
Like karma.
karma? You got it. So today, we are diving deep in some super interesting source material that suggests some seriously intriguing parallels between Newton's third law and the concept of karma.
What's really cool is we're not just going to be talking physics equations here.
Thank goodness.
Right. We're going to be looking at how this scientific principle could actually be playing out in our daily lives, like, affecting our decisions.
Oh, okay. So like influencing the consequences we experience?
Exactly. It's about more than just physics.
Okay, I am totally on board with this. So before we get too far ahead, can we do a quick recap of Newton's third law? Just in case some of us haven't thought about it since high school physics.
Of course. So basically, Newton's third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Think about like a bouncing ball.
Okay, yeah.
When it hits the ground, it exerts a force down.
Yeah.
The ground, well, it exerts an equal force back up, sending the ball back into the air.
Oh, right. Or like rowing a boat, you push the oars back against the water.
And the boat moves forward.
Exactly.
And while these examples are obviously rooted in the physical world, what the source material suggests is that this whole cause and effect thing,
Yeah.
well, it might apply to our actions and their consequences in like a much broader way beyond just, physics.
Now that's where it starts to get really interesting. And that's where karma comes into play, right?
Right. So karma, at least as it's understood in various Eastern philosophies, takes this concept of action and reaction and kind of expands on it.
Okay.
It suggests that every single action, every single one, creates consequences that go way beyond just the immediate physical reactions.
So it's not just about like if I punch a wall, my hand's going to hurt.
Right.
Right.
It goes beyond that. It extends into the moral and spiritual dimensions of our lives.
So like ethical implications too.
Exactly. Karma suggests that every action, good or bad, sets off this kind of ripple effect
Okay.
that actually shapes our experiences and influences our future.
Wow. Okay.
Positive actions, things like kindness or generosity, are believed to create positive consequences down the line. And, well, negative actions, dishonesty, hurting others, those can lead to suffering or obstacles later on.
I'm curious about the scale of this whole balancing act.
Yeah.
Is it like immediate or does it play out over, multiple lifetimes? And I guess, does it differ between like the different Eastern philosophies?
Oh, those are great questions. And you've actually hit on a really important point. Karma isn't like this one-size-fits-all concept.
Okay.
It's interpreted in different ways across different Eastern traditions. Like, for instance, in Buddhism, karma is often seen as this natural law of cause and effect that operates over many lifetimes. Actions create like imprints on our minds, influencing our future experiences.
It's like a really long game?
Exactly. Even seemingly small actions can have long-term consequences. Now, in Hinduism, there's a bit more emphasis on the connection between actions, intentions, and free will.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not just about what you do, but why you do it.
So intention plays a big role.
Absolutely.
It reminds me of a phrase the source material mentions, a complicated way of life, or ACWOL.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So a complicated way of life, ACWOL, is a concept developed by Leo Evolves, and he argues that, Newton's third law and karma, well, when you understand them together, they offer this really profound framework for understanding how, like, cause and effect works in our lives.
So it's like we're not just passive passengers in our own lives.
Right. ACWOL is about acknowledging that our actions, whether we think they're big or small, have these consequences that reach far beyond just ourselves.
So it's about taking ownership of those consequences.
Exactly. And this can be, it can be a really powerful tool for self-improvement and making, ethical decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. But if these ideas are so powerful, why do you think some people have such a hard time accepting the concept of karma? It's a pretty controversial topic, isn't it?
That's a really good question. And it's something the source material dives into a bit. One reason could be that it's just, it's uncomfortable to think about personal accountability.
Sure, yeah.
Because accepting that our choices have consequences, both good and bad, can be, let's face it, it can be tough.
It's definitely easier to just focus on what feels good right now and not worry about what might happen later.
Yeah, I get that. And in a world that's so focused on instant gratification, like quick fixes, the whole idea of karma.
Yeah.
It can seem kind of, I don't know, maybe a little less appealing.
Yeah, maybe even a little daunting.
Right. because it emphasizes long-term consequences and a more holistic view of cause and effect.
That makes sense. But, even if it's hard to wrap our heads around karma completely, the source material seems to suggest that there are some real benefits to exploring those parallels. The parallels between Newton's third law and karma. What are some of the potential benefits, would you say, of embracing this more holistic view?
Well, the source suggests it can have a huge impact on how we navigate the world and, interact with other people.
Okay.
It can encourage self-awareness, make us think more about our actions and how they impact everyone around us.
So it's like instead of just reacting without thinking,
Yeah,
we actually pause and consider the ripple effects.
exactly. And it can help us develop more empathy,
Wow.
encourage us to see things from different perspectives.
Understand how our choices might affect others.
Exactly.
So it's not just about me, right?
It's about us.
Yeah.
And it can also make us more accountable for our actions. It can lead to, a willingness to own our mistakes.
Instead of playing the victim.
Exactly. It's like we start to understand that we're not just victims of circumstance, but we're actually, active participants in creating our own reality through the choices we make.
That's a powerful idea. And speaking of choices, the source material brings up a pretty serious issue. The rising crime rates among young people. How does this fit into our conversation about actions and consequences?
Well, the source points out this concern that a lot of young people might be making choices that could hurt them
Right.
without fully grasping the long-term consequences, not just for themselves, but for others too.
Yeah.
And it suggests that maybe a lack of understanding of cause and effect, like not truly understanding the connection between actions and consequences, might be a factor in this trend.
So it's more than just about punishment, right? It's about truly understanding the ripple effects.
Absolutely. For example, with bullying, the consequences go way beyond any disciplinary action.
Okay.
It can damage trust, relationships, create this cycle of negativity that affects whole communities.
Like those ripples we were talking about, but on a much bigger scale.
Exactly.
It really highlights how interconnected we all are and how far-reaching the consequences of our actions can be. It's a bit of a sobering thought, but also a reminder that we all have the power to create positive change.
Definitely. And that's actually where things start to get really interesting. The source material suggests that understanding these principles, action and reaction, cause and effect, it can be a starting point for creating a world that's more just, more compassionate, and more harmonious.
So it's about shifting our focus from just thinking about our own personal gain to considering how our actions affect everyone.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all connected.
So it's like, if we all truly understood this idea, how would it change the way our society functions?
That's a great question. What values would we prioritize? What would that world look like?
Those are questions I definitely want to dive into.
Well, it's like picturing a world where everyone is actually thinking about the impact of their actions, not just on themselves, but on the community, even the planet. The source material paints a pretty hopeful picture.
Yeah. It sounds pretty amazing. Actually, tell me more about what this society might actually look like in practice.
Well, for one thing, the source suggests that we might see less crime.
Okay.
Because if people were more aware of the potential consequences of their actions, not just the legal stuff, but also like how would it affect their relationships, their reputation, even their own well-being, they might be less likely to do things that are harmful.
That makes sense. It's not just about being scared of getting punished. It's about understanding that our choices have those ripple effects.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that what we do can either hurt or heal ourselves and other people. And this awareness, it goes beyond just how we treat each other. It also applies to how we treat the environment.
Right. We were just talking about how everything's interconnected when it comes to how we treat each other, but it's the same with the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source really stresses how important it is to understand that these principles of cause and effect, action and reaction, they apply to our environmental choices too. Pollution, deforestation, all those unsustainable practices, they create consequences that come back to bite all of us in the end.
It's like that saying, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We have this responsibility to think about the future, make choices that will leave a healthy planet.
And a society that really understands these principles would probably make those values a priority. Sustainability, responsibility, that sense of connection with nature. It wouldn't be about using up resources just for a quick profit, but about living in a way that works with nature because we get that our well-being is tied to how healthy the planet is.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but is it actually realistic? Can just understanding these principles really lead to that kind of change, in how people behave and what our society values?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Sure.
And the source material doesn't shy away from that. It acknowledges that there are a lot of things that influence how people act, and that just knowing about Newton's third law and karma won't magically fix everything.
Yeah.
But it does say that this understanding can be a really powerful starting point for personal growth and social change.
Okay, so it's not a guarantee, but it's like a shift in perspective, a new way of looking at things that could spread and influence our choices in a more positive way.
Exactly. It's about developing that awareness that we're all connected.
Yeah.
That we're all part of this web of cause and effect.
It's kind of a powerful image. It makes me think about how even small acts of kindness or compassion, they can contribute to a more positive world.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other hand, even little acts of selfishness or carelessness, they can contribute to making things worse.
It's like the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
The idea that a butterfly flaps its wings in one place and it can eventually cause a hurricane somewhere else.
It's a cool way to think about it.
Mm.
Our actions, no matter how small, can have these ripple effects that go way beyond us. And the source material really encourages us to think about that. To think about what kind of world we're creating through the choices we make. To consider how our actions, both individually and as a group, shape the reality we experience.
It is a lot to think about, but it's also really empowering. It's like we're not just along for the ride, but we actually have a say in how things turn out.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the core message of both Newton's third law and the idea of karma. Every action has a consequence. It's a pretty simple idea, but it has huge implications for how we live and the kind of world we create.
Looking back at everything we've talked about today, it's amazing how these two ideas, one from physics and the other from these ancient Eastern philosophies, they come together to give us this framework for understanding how our actions are connected to their consequences.
They do. And they remind us that we're not just isolated individuals, but we're part of this huge interconnected web of life.
Right.
Our choices matter. They really do.
Yeah.
They have the power to create harmony or conflict, to make things better or worse.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. I'm feeling inspired.
Yeah.
And I think it's left us with some big questions to ponder.
It definitely has.
So, to everyone listening, as we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with some things to think about. What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of impact do you want to have? And how do you see these principles, this connection between actions and consequences? The ripple effects of our choices playing out in your own life.
Maybe the most important question is, what will you do differently tomorrow now that you've explored these ideas?
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? And that's what I love about these deep dives, It's not just about learning some new facts. It's about, challenging how we see things.
It is. And I think one of the most powerful things we've talked about is this idea that we're not just helpless. We actually have a choice. We can choose what we do, and those choices have consequences. They shape our world.
It's like we're all holding these invisible threads, right?
Sure.
And the way we choose to weave them, well, that creates the pattern.
I like that, the threads. And it's not just about these huge dramatic actions either.
Right.
It's about the everyday stuff, how we treat each other, the values we choose to live by.
So, even if it's just a small thing, like giving someone a compliment or choosing to recycle, that still matters.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that we're all connected, and our actions, even the little ones, they all have consequences that reach further than we think.
That's actually a really hopeful thought. It's like we all have this power to make things better just by making conscious choices.
And we're not alone in doing it either. We're all in this together, part of this incredible web of life. And we can help each other make choices that create a world that's good for everyone.
Well said. I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. So, to everyone listening, as you go about your day, keep thinking about these ideas, keep asking questions, and keep making choices that are in line with the kind of world you want to create.
And don't forget, every action creates a reaction. Choose wisely.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time.